So that's an interesting, sort of fascinating way of thinking about care, but we're inside the bubble. So if I ask the next 100 persons on the street, what role does your community pharmacy have on your healthcare team? They might shrug their shoulders. Right. So how do we not only expect more, but how do we change expectations not only in the provider community, not only in the physician community and plan community, but even within the pharmacist community? How is it that we're working with community pharmacies? So if they're going to Tripp's pharmacy 35 times a year, which our data at Community Care tells us that the patients that are being intensively care managed are going to Tripp's pharmacy 35 times a year, why don't we have this sort of cultural awakening to, here's this great asset out there, and maybe not all 10 pharmacies out there are ready to do it, but if Tripp's is ready to do it, why are you not working with Tripp more closely, and why are we not expanding this type of a model, right?
Because insurance payers make you go to a pharmacy they chose.
Okay, so that's one aspect of it.
And it's one of the issues is that pharmacies are not all the same.
Sure.
And
which
the
is
major
not necessarily a bad thing.
No, they
right?
have their place. But
they have some that are services based, some that are convenience based, and different patients have different needs, right?
Right.
But,
we need them all.
But so making this sort of discussion penetrate into the larger pharmacy chains and having more interaction and communication, not just this was denied or...
So we have this notion of the medical neighborhood that's very poignant for us. And the medical neighborhood is around the primary care health home, cardiologist, urologist, psychiatrist. And I really like this notion of thinking about the community pharmacy or pharmacy being part of that. We have not typically thought in those terms, but you bring up an interesting construct.
So there's 65-some thousand odd pharmacies out there, and heretofore the way of thinking about them in the larger policy, payer, and provider sphere is if not all 65,000 pharmacies can do it, then none of them should do it. Versus, why wouldn't you have a scenario, you make referrals all day long to folks that you work with, right? Mm-hmm. Right? So if not all pharmacies are the same and they're an under-leveraged asset, you touched on something that's really important. You're a small business owner, Tripp, correct?
Right.
You take care of patients you believe well. You work with other providers in the community well. Ostensibly, you have better clinical and humanistic and total cost of care outcomes if we were able to do that analysis. Mm-hmm. How is it that you're paid?
Transactionally on prescription dispensing for 99-point-some-odd% of our revenue.
Yeah.
Right.
So fundamentally, this is really no different than any of the other challenges we've had with fee-for-service, is that we've got a misalignment with what we're trying to accomplish with this particular provider type and the way and how we incentivize activities and payment. Because to me, being trained in population health management and health economics, 35 times a year is exactly what I need with my care managers, my primary care docs, and so on and so forth. So really quickly, how do we get there? You're a pharmacist that works in an ambulatory care clinic. Do you have go-to pharmacies that you could work with, notwithstanding the VA infrastructure, but put yourself in that typical AmCare pharmacist scenario? Why wouldn't you work with pharmacies that are going to help you with your metrics?
Yeah, no, I think what you're describing is very ideal. I wish it was, like you said, that easy to do, because even we're talking about pharmacies, even pharmacists, again, they're not all created equal. Some are trained differently. And so I think just the general awareness, and you guys have a very good integrated model. You kind of understand the value add of having a community pharmacist, having a clinical pharmacist. But again, how do you get that information disseminated? Because you have a good relationship, you're aware of those services, but someone else might not be. And almost to the point where, where you have hip and knee replacements and certain surgeons have better outcomes and you get that data quickly. And some employers were like, oh, this is who we're going to be using for XYZ. Right. If you could almost have a center of excellence and saying, Tripp's Pharmacy, this is where you kind of do that, and I don't know how you logistically do it, but there's got to be some payment model or incentive model or some billing model for him to be able to do that, because at the end of the day, he also has his bills to pay. He can't just have an extra pharmacist available just because he wants to do kind of the right thing and counsel more patients.
So my apologies, Stephen, but because you're representing sort of a payer point of view, you get the second radical hypothetical of the day. What's so radical about having either all the pharmacies or some subset of the pharmacies being measured on hemoglobin A1C? Even the ability to produce a hemoglobin A1C, it seems to me, would be indicative that you've got a relationship with providers in which you are able to interact with the patient. And isn't that a quality indicator in and of itself? I mean, wouldn't it be sort of irresponsible to say, I'm working with a patient with diabetes and I'm helping manage that patient, but you've got no visibility into the clinical markers or your patient goals or health concerns and so on and so forth. So why haven't we introduced that from a payer community perspective and then tie that to health home, medical neighborhood, pay for performance?
Very aspirational. I would say you're not going far enough, Troy. That the hemoglobin A1C is, again, is I think that we've all agreed, the four of us has agreed, is imperfect measure. That said, you do raise a very legitimate challenge that I'm going to take back to the ranch and talk about. We have had great results of having clinical pharmacists involved in our health systems transformation and delivery system transformation. We have not yet enjoined our community pharmacies, and so I'll take on that challenge.
All right.